New York City Phillips auction. I'm going to sit down with Aurel, talk about some of the crazy lots that it has. I'm going to get to handle some of the most amazing watches. It's going to be fun. Let's go. So I feel that Lange is having a moment. In my market, I saw an outrageous demand for rare Langes. But what you brought to the table is a pretty ridiculous highlight, which is a mix between the original Langes and some of the newer ones. And to me, these are the rare pieces that people want to go for.
First of all, thank you for having me. You picked one of my absolute favorite brands. And I don't say that because I'm on your show here, but fact is that 20 plus years ago, I was in Munich and at a highlight tour in front of a journalist, I was asked, how do you think Lange compares to Patek? And I said, this is as good as Patek. And what I didn't know is that right there was the manager of Patek Germany standing next to me. And I think Thierry still today is like, Aurel, I know what you said. So I'm on the record, Lange is amazing. Look at the lugs we have here is 7 different models. Everyone screams, I'm a Lange. And this is incredibly valuable for the message, the credibility of the brand. I believe that we will see special Lange ones go into the massive 6 digits.
To me, this is the top pick. The Pour Le Marie Tourbillon, the first one that they made, the one that started, no questions about it.
This is, if you have to have a one Lange collection, I would say Pour Le Marie. It's like you want to have one Porsche, you probably have a GT 3 4-liter touring manual, maybe with PTS. That's the Lange to have if you can't have a second, a third, and a fifth.
I think that Darth is going to surprise people with the estimate that you guys put. I feel like that estimate is quite low, and I think you're going to see a big surprise from this watch. This is one of the, if I had to, outside of Pour Le Marie, if I have to pick a watch, this would be my second choice. For my third choice, I would move over to something a little bit more modern because I think you're going to see a big surprise from the modern stuff as much as you're going to see it from stuff that's a bit older, let's call it neo-vintage.
I think, first of all, that you picked this one is, to me, hugely rewarding. I'm struggling at least, to think of a perpetual calendar so cleverly, so beautifully, so smoothly designed. But how can you maintain the same dial layout, but on
symmetry.
top of a plain date and power reserve, you add leap year, moon, month. I mean, it's genius. I'm a huge lover of salmon. I'm a lover of salmon two-tone. This is as good as it gets.
I can tell you right now, I'm going to be biased by this slice. My wife owns this watch. So for me...
And do you know whose favorite watch in the world this is? My 20-year-old daughter.
There you go.
It's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
It's so
gorgeous
classy.
watch. I also,
with or without diamonds?
So the 9-diamond bezel version of this watch, I probably sold at least 6 or 7 pieces to men because now smaller is becoming better. And people are looking to this beautiful, gorgeous dial and they're like, oh my God, I will wear this. This morning I was dealing with a guy and purchasing this with a brown dial.
I love it. Yeah. And I got the gray guilloche. These are the best value propositions on the market right now.
I guess we can go to AP. You have the Royal Oak Tourbillon skeleton. They made 8 of them. To me, that's the one with the crown on the back. To me, that is the ultimate sleeper of the auction when it comes to Audemars Piguet.
The funny thing is, it was always a bit the ugly duckling, the tourbillon. It didn't have a crown. It's kind of slightly...
The tourbillon cage is a little weirdly shaped.
With the Royal Oak bezel shape. But it is so important. Who's done anything like it? Nobody.
Let's transition to FP Journe. You have a 007 subscription, one of 2 two-tone watches in the auction. I don't know what I'm more excited about, the fact that you have 1 of 2 watches in your auction or the fact that it's number 007. I'm a huge Bond fan.
So am I.
So for me, when I saw 007, I'm like, okay. The estimate that you put on, again, in my mind, I set the over under at 4.8 million and I'm going with over. This is my opinion. I know you're not supposed to do these things because, again...
Well, the last time you and I bet...
That's right. I owe you a bottle of the truth.
Who won?
Yes,
Thank you.
You won. So
Thank you.
over under 4.8 million.
So, do I hear that 4.8, you're talking hammer or all in?
All in.
So my bet would be it's going to be more than $4.8 all in.
So I guess we have no bet because I said the same thing. So
good.
I'm also speaking to certain clients that I'm going to be placing bids on these things. So I kind of have some inside information as well.
Anyone I spoke to, and I have a few collectors who say, so is this just a hype or what is this watch really? This watch is possibly one of the 5 most important Journes in private hands.
I know that the 1518 Rose that's in auction today is considered to be one of the top conditions. You guys describe it as one of the best condition pieces that you guys have seen. What are your anticipation? What's the excitement like about it?
The 1518 as a watch, we discussed and we agree, is just, it's the watch. A myth. It's like a Greek temple. It's there to be lasted, to last centuries after us. This watch, if you look at the case, it's so fat. Please pay attention and tell your camera team to zoom in on the hallmark on the band. This hallmark it's mind-boggling. Is it perfect? No, of course not. You see on the dial those little oxidation spots that probably were caused by somebody removing once, maybe twice the hand. This is the watch that I've been chasing 20 years ago when it showed up in Brazil, hence the Portuguese calendar. I lost it to a dealer. From the dealer, it went to another dealer. From another dealer, it went to a collector who had it now for over a decade. I'm so pleased it is back here. I think it's one of the absolutely best examples.
I'm going to ask you an important question, or rather state an opinion and see if you agree with me. I think we're getting to a point in the market. There are certain individuals that are coming into the market from different collectors areas, like the art world. They're seeing a big value in the market saying, well, wait a minute, the unicorn of all unicorns is going to cost me 20 million bucks. Well, the painting I have hanging on my wall is $120 million. This is relatively
What about
expensive.
250?
Exactly. So now, what I'm feeling is that we're about 5 years out from a point where condition is going to become less and less important, because it's going to be like, oh, it's available. The 1518 stainless steel that you sold in auction is not going to see the light of day ever. The one we sold is not going to see the light of day ever. A lot of the pieces in your auction, such as the 1518, the price is the price, and this may very well be your last opportunity to buy it, whether it's the Journe, whether it's the Patek 1518.
I don't think we're going to run out of stuff on steel 1518s. If you go to any of the owners today and say, hey, the last one made $18 million, can I have yours for 18? They say no. If you go to 25, 30, or 40,
there's a threshold, yeah.
There's a threshold. So the market is automatically adjusting itself to the reality. None of the folks who buy these amazing Journes, Pateks, and other brands are buying these with their last $100,000 or $500,000 or million. So I don't think they're going to be under pressure to sell should we hit more challenging times. I remember a conversation I had with the CEO of the company when I was in my 20s, and I was the little kid sitting at the table, and I asked her, no hint, no spoiler alert, why is it that we are looking at Andy Warhol's, and I remember it was back then when the gossip was there might be an Andy Warhol one day selling for $20 million. It was in Maryland back in the 90s. Painting that is today, just
Right, a few zeros.
And she said, well, it's an Andy Warhol. I'm like, yeah, but that's a Patek Philippe. Yeah, but Andy Warhol is art. Well, to me, this is art. Well, but Andy Warhol only made 8 of these. Well, of these, they only made 4. Well, yeah, but it's in a museum. So wait a second. Does it mean that because and back then it was not even the Patek Museum existed. Is it that we don't have museums where we bring our kids, where they say, oh, Andy Warhol or Picasso? Is that why the Warhol is worth 20 and the steel 1518 back then was 1 million, back in the 90s? The culture, and I call it culture, for watches that has been a niche market 30, 40 years ago for a few nerds, and I was one of them, has come a long way. Are we at the end of the journey? No. We're just getting out of the tunnel, and now comes the beautiful landscape.
Well, with that said, I have a surprise for you. I brought something that I haven't shown this to the world yet. It hasn't been on social media yet, but I figured, you know what, who's the better person to see it first than you? So you know this watch very, very well. I finally got my hands on it. The most interesting part about this watch is if you look across a few references, there's only about 4 black dial calendars from Patek Philippe.
It's remarkable. Yours?
Yes.
Or you just have it for a few hours?
No, this is mine.
Through.
We bought this a couple of months ago. You'll notice that the hands, the batons, were dots at 5 and 6, where this is the only example
short
of black
batons,
dial where you
yes.
have the short batons on it, where normally there would be dots in the place of them. I'm gonna go see the rest of the stuff. I thank you so much for your time.
I'm the head of sale for watches in New York and a senior international specialist. That's a team.
See, I wasn't going to say that. Yeah, that's why I'd let her.
It's like a tongue twister.
I wanted to sit down with you specifically, and I even switched watches to something a little shinier, just because of what we've been talking about. And I'm going to call this segment the Battle of the Rainbows. I've never seen an example of rainbows in one place. Like, for example, we had this, actually we still have this in our office. We had a rainbow Daytona maybe a month back. We did have obviously the Royal Oak rainbows in the past, but never all in one place. And to me, the question becomes is who is the ultimate winner? And let's not talk dollar signs, let's talk aesthetics.
I mean, it's not easy.
I know.
But I would say that actually Omega has done a really great job here with the matching indexes to the bezel, because I'm not I love the rainbow Rolex, and I think that the gradation of the sapphires on the bezel are the best. But Omega does a great job with the sizing of their bezel sapphires and then matching it to the indexes and then just really letting the gem setting side sing. And then also they have this huge orange sapphire in the crown, which I think is such a great little touch to set things apart from Patek and AP and Rolex as well.
If you're talking about diamond set watches or gem set watches in general, to me it usually becomes something that's a little bit too loud, that's a little bit gaudy, and etc. For example, in an example of a Daytona, right? This is a quintessential sports watch, the Speedmaster and the Rolex Daytona. Mm-hmm. It doesn't get any more quintessential sporty driving racing watch than a Daytona or a Speedmaster. They go hand in hand. However, I feel that Omega managed to preserve the DNA of that original Speedmaster by making the bezel a bit more subtle. So you get in the rainbow bezel, you get in the rainbow markers, but it makes it subtle and it doesn't take away too much from the watch itself or what it's supposed to be, a true Speedmaster. Where the Daytona did quite the opposite, especially with the later models such as this. I think the diamond markers are absolutely too extra here. I kind of wish they did these batons in the Rolex Daytona. So
they do them in the modern version, but this is the 2010 version, and to me I prefer the yellow gold baton version that's more modern than this earlier one with the sort of round brilliance set to the dial.
To me, this is not an Aquanaut. To me, first of all, this is a men's watch. In their catalog, officially, this is supposedly a men's watch, which I don't see. Would I wear this watch? Absolutely. Actually, I wore this in Geneva. I've always wished they made this a whole new watch, not an Aquanaut. It's a gorgeous watch.
Okay.
I love what they've done with the bezel. The Royal Oak, I'm going to be biased. The only thing that to me is a bit of a bummer, I would say, is the fact that you stick with the original Royal Oak design and the screws break up the bezel. So that's the one thing that always throws me off. But I think the breakout of its entire lot is going to be most likely the Omega, one I'm going to watch closely because not a lot of these have made it into the auction space. Not a lot of these have made it into the secondary market. So I'm really, really curious, and I'm actually very positive towards the fact that I think you're going to see a breakout.
I hope so, because it really is well executed, and people don't realize that how special and rare, and they were not allotted to many clients. We got lucky in that we got 2 in one season, but the appreciation isn't where it should be for these, because they're really well done.
Well, Isabella, thank you so much for your time. You guys comment below who you think wins, right? Meanwhile, we're gonna go run upstairs and look at some more lots.
All right, so while I had the pleasure of sitting down with Aurel and diving deep and asking questions and stuff, I do want to run through the whole catalog quickly and pick out some bits and pieces that are amazing to me. Starting with the one that got away, the Vianney Holter Antigua, a watch I once owned for like $14,000. People were making fun of me. What is this steampunk stuff? People didn't get it, but yet today it's a $200,000 plus watch, and I regret selling that watch ever since. To me, this is Vianney Holter as far as I'm concerned. If I think Vianney Holter, I think about the Antigua. I also like steampunk design, which is why I'm probably a little bit biased. A Richard Mille that I would like to call misunderstood. That watch, were it to come out today, I think it would be a lot more popular. The Octa Finissimo showing up in the line. In fact, this catalog has a very healthy mix and a lot of modern pieces, which you normally don't see in an auction environment. But to me, I've talked about the Octa Finissimo. I think this is what propelled Bulgari to where Bulgari is today. And why not have a gorgeous DLC Octa Finissimo in an auction? That watch is absolutely gorgeous. It sits well on the wrist, even though it's a very large size. Moving right along, I'm going to skip. I'm going to go to, let's see. Another one that's having a moment right now is the Brigade Lot Traditions. People are finally starting to pay attention to pieces such as this, realizing what the La Tradition is all about, where basically the craft, the watchmaker, it's all for you on display. 3700J. This is what's the most mind-boggling thing to me today. I believe this is one of the most undervalued, underestimated lots in the entire thing. It is an estimated 1,600 pieces were made in the 3700 reference, and I'm still seeing people paying more for a modern 5711 or a 5811, which I call manufactured collectibles, versus a 3700J. Whenever one of these comes into auction, my advice to my collectors and my clients is that go after it. You should own a 3700, you should own a 5402, and you should own the original Vacheron 222, because this is it. This is where it all started when it comes to sports luxury watches. And while it was started with the Royal Oak, the 3700 is the second closest, so that's a lot to watch. I'm just winging it, so I'm just walking up in a hike. Actually, hold on, come back here. A surprise for me again is the Richard Mille skull. This is going to be a good indicator because the market exploded on the skulls to the tunes of millions upon millions of dollars. I'm actually really curious to see what this will bring. How about the Elegante, that snow set? I don't know if Journe even uses the terminology snow set. I know that Richard Mille did that, but that watch is just absolutely gorgeous. Lexi?
I love it. You
Yes?
already know.
Yeah, you already know. And of course the 5271 Sapphire, it's just drop dead gorgeous. Like I can't say anything other than the fact that this watch is just absolutely gorgeous. Lexi's favorite lot of the auction is going to be Cartier Crash. Cartier Crash is having a moment that what most people thought wasn't going to be sustainable. Let me tell you something. It's been sustainable for the last 2 years in auctions, heavy results across all major auction houses to include Phillips, and I don't expect anything less than a record result for this one. In my mind, one of the most undervalued Patek Philippe's in the market. This is the 5960 in stainless steel. When the 5960 first came out, we're talking about 2004, 2005. It came out with platinum and a gray dial. The retail price was $42,000. The market on it was double that. I do want to talk about one last watch before we wrap up, so come this way. But the one I want you to pay attention to is the 3700 Tiffany. Now, we've sold one of these. There's only 4 of them in the world. And if in comparison, if you think that the last one we sold for $450,000 today, if you look at the anniversary 5711 for the 40th anniversary, that trades for more money, and it should not be that way. There's a 4 known and existent 3700 in stainless steel Tiffany stamp.
Goodbye, New York City, and Phillips was, I mean, as expected, it was very impressive. So from a watch geek's perspective, it's always a great experience to go into a big auction house when you have a very impressive catalog. Overall, I was very happy to see that the catalog was Langenzuna heavy. It's about time that those watches get the recognition they deserve.
Turn left
and the
onto
fact
West
that
40th Street.
and
Then
the fact-
immediately take a slight right onto the ramp
I'll
to
wait.
York 495 West.
I'll wait. Listen, a couple of days, we'll see what happens.